Well, welcome to Daily Cyber. This is episode 247. My name is Brandon. I'm the cybersecurity account executive for Usato. I'm really excited today. I'm going to have Robert McFeely on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about Octiga. I want to make sure I pronounce that correctly. It's going to be interesting because we're talking about Octiga with their vision and belief that it is possible through innovation to bring simple, affordable, automated, and guided cybersecurity to small to medium to enterprise companies. They saw how small to medium to enterprise companies were underserved in different ways to barrier of the complexity and cost. So I'm just kind of reading off their website. I think today's going to be a very interesting conversation that we're going to really kind of dive into how, Robert's really seeing the industry and what he's seeing in cybersecurity and kind of how their company and their solutions are really innovating for 2021. So I'm really excited to kind of go through this conversation and learn about, how Robert's really helping in 2021. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Usato. Usato is a Canadian-based cybersecurity company that provides 24/7 cybersecurity support and compliance service that align their customers' tolerance for risk, their clients, suppliers, and government contractual mandates. Usato's teams focus on using insights to drive business decisions. There's no need to leave strategies to chance, when insights can be used to show what changes need to be made and how to make them. Usato offers multiple services to help companies simplify IT, centralize cybersecurity management, and meet compliance standards. Usato can customize their service to work with your existing IT network and programs. For more information, contact Usato at info@uzado.com or visit their website at www.uzado.com. Hey, Robert, how's it going?
How are you, Brandon? I'm well.
Not bad. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Can we say happy these days?
We could say it. Now it just depends on how you're taking everything that's going on in the world.
It's an optimistic happy.
It is. And I think we can, through our own little environments, we can make it happy.
Yes, we can. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, how's your 2021 going so far?
Well, in Ireland here, we just entered a big lockdown, and but like it's like everywhere else, you say that to people, and they're like, yeah, we're in lockdown too, we're in lockdown too. Well, I'm doing demos across North America and the UK, and it's the same all over. So everyone's in the same boat. It's a great leveler of situation. Everyone's in the room like me, and we're hanging in there. But I guess we're all looking to the future.
Yeah, I think here in Ontario, in Canada, we're actually going to go into another lockdown. I was watching the news, and we're even supposed to be more severe, more intense lockdown, just because our numbers are still increasing, and they're trying to figure out how to lessen those numbers, and they're talking about the vaccine getting out. So there's all these kind of challenges that so many people are going through. I mean, I had a colleague of mine just found out that he had COVID, and my son's going through it as well. He just got it and is now at the end result. So many people are getting exposed to it.
Yeah, that's stressful.
It is. And I mean, it's, knock on wood, people are getting it and being able to heal from it and kind of move on. And the ones that, getting really sick, the hospitals are doing their best to take care of them and, look after them. And I think the challenge for hospitals, and we talk about, security, and those is kind of the risk of it, is the amount of people that, are being admitted, the amount of people that are going in, right?
Yeah, and it's really, everybody has to take ownership of this. When we see, like I heard recently, we thought we were bad here. We're reaching. It's all about your ICU capacity. Your intensive care capacity and how close to 0% it is. And we thought we were bad, and then I realized that California has 0% ICU capacity. Well, it was last week, right? And it's happening the world over. And when you reach that sort of level of saturation, the bets are off, right? You could come in for something that you really shouldn't be, serious for. Could be a car accident, and there's just no beds for you.
Right. Exactly. Right. And they're doing their best to manage, right, the flow of patients and things like that. And it's, I really appreciate and value kind of the healthcare workers and all the work that they're doing right now, since, February, some of them even earlier, January of, 2020, and all the hard work they're putting. So it's,
Absolutely, yeah. I've a lot of connections and family and friends who are in the profession, and man, has it been a stressful year. But anyway, we plow on.
oh, exactly. And I think for us, one of the challenge, and I don't know if you found this in 2020, did you see a little bit of an increase in compromise and attacks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying. I think we did a blog a couple of days on our site, and it was obvious that there was an increase in attacks, but we had to obviously do some bit of background research for the article and just looking over the figures, and it's quite actually startling, and it's quite horrible as well in a way. Like immediately in March when all of this started happening, there was immediate attacks sort of preying on, some people. Sometimes, you go back to like hackers and that idea from years ago, and hackers were these cool people on skateboards and they had scruples, and the attacks that came right after COVID were all centered around, there was attacks, targeting the WHO email, right, and stuff like that. And people were saying, stuff about COVID, and people are already worried. When you're really, really worried, you're just going to click on that thing, and that's a really nasty side of things. I mean, look, we all know the big attacks from, like Twitter. I mean, the election, and Biden's Twitter getting breached, and then Trump had the stupid password, and it like such high profile stuff. And let's face it, Solarigate, isn't that what they're calling it? Everything seems to have a gate these days when it's a
well, there's a conspiracy behind it,
Yeah. I looked up that recently, and the Watergate was like, is that hotel still there? And I looked it up, and it is, and I realized then they probably did well after the, from
yeah. There's probably a lot of people for publicity or even just research, as they're, you got your conspiracist people that just want to do some research on the history, right? And go that location and kind of look at, as they're reading through it and what happened at that time, to see kind of all that. But yeah, you look at the SolarWinds, and, FireEye was the first initial kind of, media exposure that we kind of got to this, first outbreak, is that FireEye got compromised, and then as it progressed, into SolarWinds and the Orion and kind of all that, and then I don't think they still know, and this is just my opinion, I don't think they still know the impact, right, of the compromises.
I would imagine there's a lot of organizations, especially federal organizations in the US, which are quite slow to say, because they might be defense. And things like that. I would imagine they might be slow. They mean something natural. And I think as well, it's kind of what 2020 has kind of taught us, is that there's no correlation between size and target.
Okay.
It's like these big companies like SolarWinds and FireEye and this, they were big companies. You think, oh, well, big companies, they've got to be really, really secure. And that's just not the case. There's still guys called Bob who leave a server open with password 1234 on it. and that that comes down to the people in the organizations, and like for example, like the president's email being hacked and things like that. Those are also, the size doesn't matter. I think some of the business email compromises about Microsoft Office showed that as well. People are just unjudiciously attacking and selling on these things. Doesn't matter, the bigger the company, they might sell it for a bit more. Smaller the company, they sell it for a bit less. But there doesn't seem to be a correlation of size and safety,
right,
or size and risk, whichever way you want to look at it.
So let me ask you this. I mean, then you brought up a good point. If we were going to debrief about 2020, what are like the top 5 things you'd pull out from we've learned as cybersecurity professionals from 2020?
Well, I'm not so sure it's the professionals have learned as much as the rest of the people.
Okay.
I think it's the minute, right? You can imagine I'm thinking, right, I live here in Galway in the west of Ireland, and whenever I picture these things, I picture maybe companies I've worked with, or companies that I know, and who have IT systems, right? And I could think of them. They've been in the office every day. They work in the office. They don't do remote work. It's not a thing. They have PCs at their desks, and if they had to work from home, it would be like very, very strange and unusual, and they'd probably be doing it off their phone or something. And then suddenly they're all sent home, and the normal worker is just carrying on. They get a laptop, they get it set up, and they just plow on. And then suddenly the CXOs, or whatever they are, suddenly realize I'm not in the office anymore. I felt secure when there was a blinking light in the corner of the room, and I could kind of square that away. And the perimeter was kind of the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a strange idea in your head. I mean, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that idea of the breaking down of the perimeter, I think the realization that maybe there was no perimeter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think has been what's learned a lot by the people on the ground.
Okay.
That for me has been the biggest learning curve. I mean, obviously the cyber guys have learned a lot as well, but really that realization, and I don't think that's going to change. We'll go back to the office, but I think people are going to realize this, that half of their IT systems were, yeah, okay, they were in-house and they might have had a local on-premise Exchange server or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
but that could be open to the internet. And then they were using all these cloud, and you've got the shadow IT stuff, and their staff are using Evernote, for example, or some kind of note-taking system, and they're putting client stuff in there, and they're thinking, well, this is safe because this is the cloud. And then suddenly they go outside, and suddenly we realize that the perimeter isn't what we thought it was.
Right.
And I think that's been a wake-up call. And maybe, I mean, God forbid, we had a global pandemic, but there's got to be silver linings to it. And maybe it's going to be, one of them, as we always said, is the remote work. Do we have to be in this office all the time? Do we have to be doing these horrible commutes? But the other one is in this security, I think, and the realization that that security doesn't have boundaries, and it all has to come back to us and our culture.
Mm-hmm. No, totally makes sense. Now, just a little housekeeping, guys. I see there's a few people watching. If you want to comment or ask questions of Robert or myself, if you're on Twitch or on YouTube, or you're on LinkedIn, you're watching this, you want to go over to those social sites, comment. We'll bring in your questions, and we'll go through them as we're going through this stream, and be able to answer any questions that you have live. So, talking about that, Robert, now you talk about the landscape and how the perimeter changed, all that. Something interesting I heard about from Dr. Eric Cole was that the mindset changed of the actual locations, because most companies have one, maybe two, or maybe several locations. But when the employees went remote, right, they didn't think of that as a new location. They didn't think of that as a new, that now I have 200, or say I've had 50 employees, that 50 employees, now each employee is a completely new location. That I have to have security policies, processes, systems, and I have to think about as an organization that now my company has expanded from 2 locations to 56 locations.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But was it always that way for a lot of companies? Because like if you think about it, I remember back in 2010 when I started my IT, I got out of some stuff I was previously in, and I went into IT, and I started working for Hewlett Packard, and they had a remote work policy back then. And sometimes I would work half my week at home, but there was like, and at one point I remember I could get, I think I could get email on my phone, that whole bring your own device thing. And that's kind of a gray area, right? And maybe these things in our pockets, these are our locations,
right?
As well, Now I don't think HP really have that risk with the bring your own devices, but a lot of companies do.
Right.
It's a gray area.
For sure. Now going forward, so you kind of recapped a little bit on the perimeter and what's going on. What do we need to look at for 2021? What are some things that you would say, like if I was a CISO or in the C-suite kind of area, what do I need to look at for 2021?
Okay, well, I mean, his obvious one is remote, and getting everybody secure remotely. Realizing that you need to secure across your infrastructure, not just your on-premise stuff, but also your cloud stuff. And are you secure across your cloud stuff? And how are you secure across your cloud stuff? It's not just, well, don't put that kind of data in that sort of cloud. If you're, I mean, GDPR did great education for that, and obviously there's similar standards coming in over in your side of the pond. But that thing about remote is it's really come to the fore. It's one of those things that we've realized recently, and where was I going with this? The stuff that's coming in 21, we're going to have to educate our people more. The top to bottom, we can get it. We can go across our stack, right? And we can say, look, take a look at all of our on-premise infrastructure, and then take a look at all our cloud stuff. And then you kind of got to move below that a little bit and say, well, who's operating all this stuff? And that's your people.
Right.
right? And are the people educated?
Okay.
And you know, and there's in every company there's tech savvy people. I mean, we think tech a lot. You're tech, I'm tech, right? But we in tech people tend to think in tech. And you go to some accounting firm, and Joe at reception, is he tech savvy? You
Yeah.
know, older. I mean, I don't mean to be ageist, but older people tend to be less tech savvy than younger people, perhaps maybe.
You know
And
what? The funny thing is, I'm gonna kind of stop you there. There's actually some guys, the older generation, that used to be the jack of all trades because
yeah,
they used to have to be the guy, the
hmm
database, the website, the
this is true.
server, like all that. So having a little support for them, and I'm gonna, ageism, I'm gonna support these guys, the older guys. Those
That's
Some of
true.
those guys had that kind of that knowledge where they had to learn coding, programming, networking, at that time, security, which wasn't defined, but
Yeah,
they had to lock things down while
yeah,
being the desktop support, while being, the budget, the
yeah.
finance guy. So some of these guys from the old school, like, and I used to work on the Ontario government, and you talk to some of the guys that have been around for years, and you hear all the stuff they had to do. And now,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, the roles and responsibilities have spread out and went deep, right?
yeah.
And we've expanded when it comes to technology. So completely agree on the outside. Like now,
Mhm,
your cloud, your Amazon cloud,
mhm.
that's a lot to learn and be able to, now if you want to go over to Microsoft's cloud, that's a
Yeah,
lot to learn and to develop. And maybe you can
yeah,
cross over, but it's hard to
yeah,
keep up because Microsoft makes a change and now you're a
yeah,
newbie again, right?
yeah, yeah. But I mean, but your point, while is very, very valid, is still valid for maybe the IT sector a
Mhm.
bit more than it would be. You know, you move outside of that, and we all have IT. We all have an IT operation, and some companies are IT operations without realizing. You know what they say about banks. You know, an IT company with a banking license,
Right.
um, and unless IT oriented companies, but yet have IT. You get people of all shapes and ages and walks of life, and they are sometimes your risk surface. You
For
know,
sure.
for example, I mean, we talk about like the breach into Congress, and all of those people are now your risk surface because all the people walked into the office, and you got the sticky note at the top of the thing. What's my password again? And are they using password storage? Like, for example, the biggest eye opener for me in recent years was we were using LastPass. But look, I'm not going to push LastPass. There's lots of good
Mhm.
password, managers, right? A password manager is really, really important. It stops us sticking our password to the
Mhm.
top of our thing, and sharing around of credentials, and really those little soft skills
Mhm.
around security are the important thing. Like, we take it for granted. I can take anybody into the office, and it's obvious. Lock the door after you came in if or you're leaving in the night time. Lock the door when you go out, and that's a soft skill. We all know that you don't leave the office without locking it up, because you know what the boss is going to give out to you tomorrow morning when he comes in, and there's the wind's blowing through the office. But
Right.
do we have those soft skills in cybersecurity? You know, and
Well,
that's a sort of
I think that comes down to cybersecurity awareness training, right? Like not only just
agreed.
roles and responsibility and kind of that training of
Mhm.
understanding your policies, your procedures, acceptable use policy, kind of
Yes.
all those, but also cybersecurity, what you can and cannot do, and if you do this action, what's the actual repercussion? What
Yes.
actually can happen, and going through
Yeah.
that knowledge and that training to be able to say, if you click on this link,
Hmm.
you could get malware downloaded and it'd be key longer,
Yeah.
ransomware, anything along that line. And that now is your responsibility as a user.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're IT, like top down, bottom up. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter who you are. You're responsible for that action.
Yeah, but also, it's a lot of companies, they said, right, a lot of companies have this mindset of risk, and
Mhm.
either I take the risk on, or I make somebody else risky for this, and then but I write a contract so that I can sue them, and then I'm okay. So you get an employee in the door, and you give them a contract, and you say, well, you have to do all these things in the contract, and you probably don't read it, and this is your IT security policy, and nobody really reads it, and it's okay because it's there, and they've signed up to it, and therefore I can blame them. But who's actually going to be hurt when
Mhm.
they don't read that, and then there's a breach? It's the company, it's the brand that's going to be hurt.
Mhm.
Like, in a previous, I won't say where or when, place thing that I worked at,
Right.
there was a small breach, and these kind of people, they knew that their password that they had, and they just never bothered changing it because it was shared around, and it was one of those sort of delegate accounts, and they thought, well, we're too small, and no one's ever gonna try and breach this. And of course, it was breached by bots, right?
Right.
Just go and try and password 1 2 3 4. We'll try that. Boom, and then suddenly there was emails about about breast enlargements going out from their outbox, which was rather embarrassing.
Right.
And and it's that kind of awareness. And a lot of companies don't do those cyber trainings.
Right.
They say, there's your policy. You have to adhere to that. In the same way you've got all those other policies that you probably put in the top drawer, right, of work, and you go, I'll read that later, and you never do.
Right. And I think that's important. That comes back down to like the environment, the education of the environment itself from top down, and the responsibility that the organization's taking on. Because again, you've got due care and due diligence at the C level where they have to make sure that they know of all the risks, and they have to, if there's something there's a vulnerability, there's a risk, they have to take the appropriate actions.
Yes.
Right now, it might be like you said, transference, that we write a policy and that should be good enough, or we have insurance and that will cover it. And there's all different methods of hardening a system. But at the end,
the insurance isn't really good enough, right? Because you can't. There's all these intangible costs to a breach. It's not just the indemnity cost that you're covered or whatever. It's maybe it's the premium going up afterwards, or it's your brand damage. And how do you quantify that? And how do you quantify just the fact that you ran around like a headless chicken for a week in complete panic, or you lose trust in the people in your work, and there's damage in so many ways. And it needs to be more than just that contract. It needs to be okay, we give them the contract, but I really got to sit them down in a room for a week. It's worth my business value to do this.
Right. And I think some of the tools that we use, and I'm sure you're aware of that, where that actually has a validation of training, right? And their scoring of their training, and then, retraining if they don't score to a certain level that, the company organization has set as passable. And then they have to go through cybersecurity awareness training to at least have a baseline, right? That everyone at least is trained up to that level. Now, don't get me wrong. There's human actions and people make mistakes and whatever, but at least the awareness is at a certain baseline.
But Brandon, do you think it needs to be more than just training? I feel it needs to be culture, right? I think the difference between someone who's trained and someone who evangelizes is a big difference, right? When you evangelize, it's a giving, cross-pollinating sort of a thing, right? When you've got like if you're worked in a company where there's great tech evangelists, it just keeps spreading out from them, right? Or work in a company where everyone knows the spec, but oh yeah, I'm supposed to stick to this, but I don't actually do it. And it's culture that evangelizes. So I think it's really cultural mindsets that, and how do you train that? That has to, it's almost like you have to train the CXOs in a different way. You got to be evangelists for this. You got to understand it, and then you got to be an evangelist. And the rest of the people, they got to learn it and they got to listen.
And agree, totally agree. And that's the top down, bottom up approach, right? Where you have the top, owners, C-suite, board of directors, all like subscribing to, we're doing this, like this is what we believe in and this is what we're doing, and they're living it. Like you said, they're living and they're breathing it each and day versus you know what, that's our policy for company, I'm going to do something different. My password as the chief CFO is going to be 1 2 3 4 5, but you as our bookkeeper, you need to have a 25 character password, special characters, and all the different things. So yes, of course, and I totally agree, you have to have that total environment of everyone's bought into it, right? And I think the challenge is when you get to, they talk about in CISSP, the confidentiality, data integrity, and availability, right? Or confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability is so challenging because users want things easy, accessible. And you talk about and I'll use LastPass. I know users that don't want to use LastPass because it's too hard. It's too difficult.
Because they have to sometimes copy the password when it doesn't fill it in.
Or you get two-factor authentication, so you have to go log in, put in your password to the actual tool, right, the console, and then go and get the code from some sort of Google Authenticator, and then put that code in. And all I'm trying to do is just log into my email. Like, oh my God, this is so hard, right? So
absolutely. And look, we gotta have, one thing is saying, it's really easy to use MFA. MFA is not as easy to use as without MFA. Look, I just got a new phone. And I still haven't got it set up with my Microsoft, so I'm doing the text message one for a couple of days. Right. Well, I get the time to set. I'm still using MFA, but but it is harder to have to wait for the text message, and it just is a little bit harder.
Right.
But we have to accept that.
Right. And I think that's where the fine line of convenience and availability has gone. So and you think about like if I talk to my grandparents and ask them about logging into computers and things like that, They go grab a tea, coffee. They come back. It's very relaxed. They're not like our generation and all that. It's like
Yeah.
it's not instant. I remember
Yeah.
like someone was talking to me a joke about like and they were showing that or they were it was a sound bite of the old fax machine,
Yeah.
right? And you hear like, or actually no, it was internet. Sorry, it was internet dialing up internet
Oh yeah, yeah.
when you had to connect and you dialed in.
33K modem. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you did that and you hear it dialing up and you had to wait till it connected before you get to the internet, like you
Yeah.
think about back to those times to now where it's like you open your computer, you open up Chrome, Safari, whatever that may be, and you're
Yeah.
on, you're good, you're
Yeah.
going. We're at that point where you had to click on what was it, Netscape or I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of the other ones, and you click on it and then it dials out, right? And you hear
Yeah.
that loud kind of
Yeah,
crackling
and then your
fax
mom
machine,
picks up the phone. That was a big problem for me. And then I was trying to download that song from Napster, right? And
right?
mom.
And then you get disconnected, you have to start again, you have to wait.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but and that I think that's where we've kind of lost in the sense of the process of working with technology is it's so convenient. It's
yeah,
so convenient. The expectation is it should work. I should be able to do it right now.
yeah.
Versus it's going to take a little bit of time. Let's kind of wait. I'm going to go through this
Mhm.
process of security, and that's going to
Yeah,
help me be more safe. The organization be safe. My department, my colleagues, and I think,
yeah,
like you said, it's a little bit of a mindset change.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And we're talking about phones there, and just back to your question on things you see this year, coming up. I really think, and I alluded to it earlier, the sort of the bring your own device
Yeah,
problem, right? A lot of companies they want, I want to contact Bob just in case everything goes pear-shaped over at night, right? And he's got his phone and but I don't manage that phone, and I don't know, we don't have enough money or resources to tell Bob I'm going to buy you a phone, and Bob doesn't want two phones. So I say just install, the email on your phone and access it through that. Does Bob have a password? And if I can't tell Bob to put a password in his phone, it's his phone, and there's a gray area there, and it's not being addressed.
right,
And I
right.
think that's and if one thing we learned in 2020 is that constantly we're learning again, right, is that threat actors are adapting all the time, and they're just going to adapt to the net. They're moving on ahead, one step ahead every single time, and they're learning, and I think the BYOD is going to be a big area as well.
For
Bring your
2021.
own device, sorry, just for to not abbreviate.
Yeah, for 2021.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
So moving forward, like what is the best security approach to small to medium size to enterprise with a
Yeah.
tight budget right now? Because I mean, we're in the pandemic, the board of directors, C-suite are all now being very cost effective in what they're spending
Yeah.
right now. How can they implement security?
So I think firstly it's the realizations and evangelizing culture that's cheap. Culture's cheap when it's started at the right place.
Hmm.
Training, it's got to be there, and then it's starting with it's not just taking a security solution that just does a vertical of your stack or a vertical of your area. Get virus scanners on all the machines. You got it. Like I like the way NIST does it. The protect, identify, protect, detect, remediate, and respond.
Hmm.
And that's something we tried to do in our solution at Octiga. I won't peddle the product too much today, but it's that security journey,
Right.
right? And we cannot just stand up some solutions and let them go. It's okay. We installed last year that thing on the computer. It should be fine.
Right.
Uh, why aren't SMEs getting monitoring?
Right.
For example, I mean, a lot of SIM tools are quite difficult to set up. It's something we focused on with in Octiga is to simplify the monitoring thing, and also remediation. We focused a bit on that as well. And we're trying to focus on that whole security journey. Now we're doing it for Office 365, but a lot of organizations just use Office 365 as their main
Hmm.
security risk surface, right? And I really resonate well with that kind of approach. You have to try to not get hacked, and then you have to detect when you are hacked, because you're not going to be perfect at the first.
Hmm.
And then when you actually get breached, you got to get yourself out of the crap real quick. If you find that hack 2 months down the line, you got a real problem.
Right.
Especially since GDPR and all that kind of stuff.
Well, even like exploration of data. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
some compromise, and you kind of look at the point of when they've got compromised to actually when they've detected it, sometimes can be up to 6 months to 1 year.
Yeah, there was an IBM survey. They say it was like 200 days or something like that. It's absolutely bananas. And if you just had monitoring, you could. I'm not saying it would detect everything, but realistically, that could be one day, it could be 30 minutes, right? No,
Right.
Bob's not in that country. I deactivate account, you
Right.
know, and just as simple as that. Yeah.
Hmm.
So.
For sure.
Mm,
And I think that's important also. You got to kind of got the NIST kind of framework in the sense of
mm,
detect, respond, and
mm,
remediate. What other things would you recommend that people look at with a tight budget? You know, because you talked about culture and things along that line. Is there anything
yeah.
other areas you would recommend?
What else would I recommend? I mean, look, a lot of the soft things don't cost you too much. They might cost you time in the organization.
Okay.
We can't start that project till next week, but that might be easier to, get into the budget. We just can't start it until next week. It's, I don't have to budget it, right? It's a different way of thinking. Our security solution comes at a pretty low price point. That's what we're trying to, give, somebody a solution that where you can come in at a low price point and cover a big area. So
Mhm.
it's sort of solutions that come in at a reasonable price point and cover as wide as possible. But after that, it's got to come back to culture and people. You know,
Okay.
and another thing is people they sort of choose solutions as if all male actors are external. I did a demo to a guy I know recently. Friend in Ireland here, and he was just saying how he had a guy working for him for a long time, got hired by another guy, and just took all the accounts with him. You
Oh
know,
wow.
and like, and none of them really said, and he just lifted a whole lot of stuff, and a lot of breaches with, and sometimes they're negligence, and sometimes they're malactors. But is it 50% actors are internal? And so you got to be detecting that stuff as well. It's not just detecting phishing scams or whatever that can be. You've got to cover while you're covering the whole security journey, but you also got to look at 50% of breaches are internal.
Wow.
And probably half of those are negligence, and half of those are malevolent, and half of them are benevolent, if you like. They're planned, and half of them are just, oops, I forgot, I left that. I printed that out and took it to the cafe and left
Right.
it on the table. You know.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you bring that up because I mean you look at access points and identity access management and you
Mm,
look at even just privilege access management, right? Like
mhm,
IAM and PAM and all that. So
mhm.
those areas can be things that companies look at too. For that concern is to make sure that the right people have the right access and
Yeah,
then it's being monitored so there's no data loss prevention.
yeah,
It's just there's data loss prevention system, but there's no data
yeah,
loss. So then
yeah,
what happens is if the data starts to kind of go in there's certain triggers like they're downloading gigabytes
yeah,
of data and all of a sudden they're not supposed to. It's a financial directory
yeah,
that flags
yeah,
a report, right? Or an
yeah.
alert.
Yeah, and I think, like you can spend time in the cloud offerings that you have. Like Microsoft Cloud offering has a whole lot of bells and whistles. You got to know how to go in and configure that, and that's a lot of what Octiga try to do is simplify all that. But if you go in there, you can configure DLP settings, right, and
Okay.
and you can configure access settings, and they're simple tricks, right, where people are saying like, I got to secure my Teams, and people are sharing stuff from Teams so easily out, and there's holes everywhere in my SharePoint, right, and people are getting in from the outside, maybe even accidentally, and they're looking at folders where people didn't know they'd shared the whole folder, not just a file or whatever. And there's simple tricks, like, for example, create an area in Teams and tell everyone only share from that area, for example, like that. And that doesn't cost you a penny.
Right.
They're just smart tricks.
Right. It's more kind of the archetype and or
Yeah, and,
design
and
and what.
what fits your organization as well, right? And
Right.
and like that could fit my organization, which is create an area and team. And one size doesn't fit all for security. Smaller companies, sometimes a much simpler solution can work.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So now talking about that, like, what are some of the misconceptions about like the cloud security?
Yeah, I suppose the one I like to say is the first misconception is that the cloud is secure, and the
Okay.
second misconception is that the cloud is not secure.
Okay.
The first one, right, is that this has been managed by this big organization, and therefore it must be secure. But these things come out of the box. They're just IT systems. They just don't happen to be on your premise. And they've got holes, and they've got, if I go into Microsoft 365, for example, there's about 10 protocols that open up legacy authentication methods, and Outlook web access and different things that can really leave you open. and you got to get in there and you got to get that configured correctly. So you can't just start using the cloud and assume that it's been used securely, and also the people tie in with that as well, right? And I suppose the second one is that, is the cloud, the misconception that the cloud is not secure. People have this idea, whoa, it's not the blinking, light in the corner of the room, therefore, it's not secure. Sometimes the machine that's out on the internet by that company, well, they're very, compliant of whatever standards are out there, and a lot more than Bob who installed your blinking light in the corner. So right. so it's funny, it's the cloud brings more security, but it brings less security. It's just a different beast.
Now, what about the shared security model?
What's your question?
What's your thoughts on that? Like, especially when it comes to the cloud.
Sorry, I don't follow.
So some people, like, have talked about, like, Amazon, their security models is what they could consider is called a shared security model, right? So we only take care of the internal environment, the servers,
you're right. I see what you're saying.
That environment, but you put it on whatever data, whatever you as an organization are responsible. Our line is right there. We'll secure the hardware
in the stack, and we will secure from here down in the stack. But it's a cloud, and you got to secure up the way. And look, that comes with the territory. There's a certain point, like you're building an application on top of a secure stack. If your application that you've built is full of holes, they cannot do anything about that. And we can't. We have this terrible thing in our society of it's somebody else's fault. We got to take ownership of these problems. Like if I make a web application on top of a really secure Azure stack, but I leave all of the APIs open with no credentials on them, and then I'm creating a problem, and that's the way of the world. We have to embrace the ability to stand up fast cloud infrastructure. With open API. I mean, what really driven the internet is really API. What really has made it grow is like the REST API. It's like that standardization. But with that standardization, are you doing it securely? I mean, HTTPS is kind of only now is it like becoming the default. It's like talking about WhatsApp and Signal, and Signal is a strange thing over the side here that it's the secure messenger. Oh, I just use WhatsApp, or no. Like, I use WhatsApp myself. I love it, but I'm not trying to be disingenuous to them or anything. But now people are kind of going, well, hang on, let's look at these more obscure HTTPS or encrypted end-to-end offerings and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you bring up WhatsApp. I mean, from the news and what we're kind of hearing that now stream is that since Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg bought it, now we're starting to have privacy issues and all that. But it was, like you said, initially secure end-to-end, chat platform, messaging platform, right? Now they're questioning, okay, is it really? And, where's the data, and is it being shared and stored, and which it wasn't before. So, I mean, anyone that's watching this is going to see kind of that news articles and blog posts and videos that are going on right now about it, and people are moving over to different platforms now because they want the secure communication.
Absolutely, and you have to realize that anything you put out there is on a server somewhere, and it's going to be there forever. It's one of the first things I learned in the IT world is don't put anything in digital that you don't want to stand over for the rest of your life.
I remember when I was younger, well, not myself, but I spoke to in a school. So I was younger, but I went to school and I talked to I think it was high school students, and I was just kind of having a cybersecurity awareness training and just talking to them about what they need to be aware of. And that was one of the things that opened my eyes to how people don't really realize them hanging out, doing different activities can affect their career, 5 to 10 years down the road, is when they're going for an HR interview and they do a deep dive through their social media and scrape it, and then see the people that they're hanging out with. They're like, they're not right for our culture. They're actually potentially a liability or a risk. We're not going to hire them. They're not going to tell them that. They're just not going to hire them. Yeah. And now the people are like, why can't I get hired?
Yeah, or something that was okay 1 year, like in 20 years, what's not going to be okay as well, right? The Canadian president our prime minister had that problem, didn't they? Right? It was, what's okay in one generation, you think this is fine today, but in 20 years, that picture of me doing whatever, is that going to be cool then? Like I remember coming, I was working as a postgrad, And I remember looking at my mate's Facebook, and there was a picture of him, and he had a big doobie in his mouth. And I said,
Yeah.
you know, he was young and silly or whatever. And I said, look, you need to take that down. That's not going to be cool forever.
Right. And yeah, like that, those are the things, you know, and I like the ones I was talking were throwing gang signs, right? They weren't in
Mhm.
gangs. They were just young kids that were
Yeah,
listening to rap and things like that, but they're throwing gang signs. Well, you just got to be careful. Someone watch it, looking at doesn't know the context of that, that you're just having, trying to have
correct.
fun, and they don't realize, the
Mhm.
depth of that. So doing
Mhm.
that in your own brand, right? Your own brand and brand reputation, and you talked about brand a lot,
Yeah.
is that you got to be careful that your own brand, as you're getting out there and
Mhm.
making sure it meets what you need in your environment, what you want. I know
Yes.
if you're a rapper and all that, and that's kind of your persona and all that, and you're maybe in clothing, whatever that may be, and
Mhm.
that's your niche. But if you're
Yeah.
trying to go to, say, a corporate America job, finance, let's say a bank, that might not line up with what they
Yeah.
want as their culture.
Yeah.
So you just got to be very careful how you're moving forward and how your brand as an individual is being posted
Yeah.
online.
The digital world is a hard one.
Oh, for sure.
Hard.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, we've talked a lot about, when you're talking about cloud and security, what are some of the barriers that are preventing small companies right now from achieving, adequate cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, look, we touched on some of it earlier. I think it's that education is the first thing, and it's not just, I don't have the money to educate my staff. Is that I might not, have the knowledge to know where to start, or even that it is a problem.
Hmm.
The organization that I talked about, where I'd been previously, and they had a breach. There wasn't a cult, like they didn't even know that this could have been a problem.
Okay.
And there's a lot of organizations out there. You take any, some company that sells books in your local hometown, and they've got a few stores and they got an IT system, and they might not have tech people, and they've hired some local managed service provider to set up the thing, but they never asked about security.
Hmm.
And the managed service provider put some stuff in, but let them go because that's all the contract they had. And then suddenly there's this big gap, and nobody knows to start to ask the questions.
Right.
And I think that's a great barrier. It's reaching people to make them realize that this is a problem. And that's that. I think that's one of the barriers, and that leads on to, do you have the knowledge in house to do this, or where do you start? Like you could even, as we talked about earlier, everything needs to be so pronto, and business has kind of gone with that. So if something's slow, it's automatically a major drag. So if I have to spend a day looking up what kind of solution I should even get in the first place, that's, without even getting into that solution and then learning that solution,
Hmm.
that feels like a major drag to my business. and
Right.
and I think that's a major barrier for SMEs. The other one I think is, and I alluded to it earlier on the size thing, is the naivety that it won't happen to me
Right.
culture. you
Because
know
you're smaller. Is that kind of the?
yeah, I think so. Look, we deal with SMEs a lot in our business, and it's that thought that it won't happen to me because I'm small. But yet, most hacking is probably bots. I don't know. Like a lot of it out there is just, trying endpoints and seeing if some password and cycling through them and seeing if it works. And that's that idea that, that kind of thinking. I suppose the other one is, you get companies, we get asked, and companies say, do you have ISO 27001?
Right.
And you're a small company, and ISO 27001 is a big job to do,
For sure.
and where are, this, I don't think there are more, but there maybe isn't enough standards in there, or regulatory pushes for smaller companies to achieve smaller goals. I was listening to a podcast the other day. We get these kind of podcasts after Christmas where people say, this is how you create a habit, right? Is you try, and I love the line, is try to be mediocre.
Right.
you know you got to be mediocre first. Go out, just run to your gate and back, do that every day.
Right.
Do it's that habit forming thing.
Right.
And it's like we need standards that are mediocre. We can't just say, well, look, it's ISO 27000, and we're going, yeah, okay, well, we'll do that next year.
Right.
You got to start with, well, I'm going to achieve, like the UK has one, the Cyber Plus, and it's not too difficult. And it's, you could do it sort of in a day or whatever it might be, and that's really achievable.
Right.
And there needs to be, we need to fill that middle ground.
Right. And
you know.
I think for the middle ground too. I mean, it depends on your requirements, and like
Mm,
kind of talking about in through our company we have an MGRC program and we do like
mm,
management, government, risk, and compliance, and
mm,
it comes down to what's the driver that's driving that compliance. Is it a nice to have because I'm a company, or is
yeah,
there a driving fact because your industry says that if you want to run a business in this industry, you need to
yeah,
be PCI, ISO, GDPR,
yeah,
whatever that compliance,
yeah,
you just need to be it because it's a certain standard that you have to meet,
yeah.
and I think if it's a nice to have, we
Hmm.
have like the NIST standards that the framework you can go off
Mm,
of and just use as a framework and meet certain, criteria. But if you're going for compliance and there's a
yeah,
driver that needs that,
yeah.
it becomes a very hard discussion for organizations because there's a lot of administrative controls, technical controls,
Mm,
and things that are very costly to be able to implement over time and distance. And
hmm.
then, like, is manage it
Hmm.
over the next, because it's not the point where I got it set up and
Yeah,
now I'm done. Whew, I can step
yeah,
away. It's no, now you have to manage it. You have to manage the logs. You have to manage the cybersecurity. You have to manage the policies. And you go through
yeah,
change management projects. Now you have
yeah.
to update all your documents and things that happen. Like, it's just
Hmm.
this living, breathing entity. And
Yeah.
people don't realize as they're doing that, it is a huge undertaking.
Indeed, and but I think when GDPR first came out in Europe, people were complaining like, how are we going to to make it so that all this data is deletable and all this kind of stuff, and people were saying, oh, how do we do the marketing thing? Because you can't have it ticked by default and all that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, GDPR has been a godsend because it pushed everybody up, maybe just towards that as a kind of mediocre level, gets you've got to push people a little bit. I think the more industries where you make it contingent on that even low level of regulation within the industry, suddenly everyone comes in and everybody's a winner. The bar moves up.
Right. And I think it's an ongoing dynamic bar because, as you set
Mm.
that bar and you get them at a certain level, the hackers go, okay, you're here, but I'm over here and I'm up at this level and I'm going to
Yeah,
chip away at you. And then you have to keep
but you
moving.
but you got to fight. You can't not fighting because you think that bar is dynamic is not an option.
Right. Right.
Mm.
And that's why, just to educate people that are watching this, or maybe are thinking that, I'm a small, like you said, I'm a small company. I don't have to worry about it. Like you said,
Yeah,
they'll chip away at you. Like it's
yeah,
one thing, like social engineering, right? And they'll work on your staff and just trying to compromise them that way. Email,
yeah,
phishing campaigns, bots and all that from your access points and,
yeah,
infiltrate kind of your data or your
yeah,
servers, whatever that may be. They're
yeah.
trying at all different angles, right? It's not
Yeah,
just one. It's not like,
especially business email compromise, especially like your staff and getting oh, my bank account details have changed, and if you don't have the policies in place like some of the smaller organizations do, you're more at risk because someone's going to email you someday, oh, just change the bill, you change the bank account number on that and send me the 50K, you hear the horror stories, and in ways I think it's the smaller companies that are much more susceptible to those invoice frauds. I've never actually looked at the figures of invoice fraud across size,
mhm.
but I imagine it could be quite horrible in the low areas.
Well, I think it was on the news. Barbara from the Shark Tank, she got compromised from that exact scenario
Right.
where someone sent in, "Hey, you haven't paid the invoice," right?
Mm-hmm.
And it went to their assistant or the person
Mm-hmm.
that was signing off. They didn't realize, it wasn't a valid email. They
Yeah.
went and sent the check, right? And they sent the check to the wrong person, and sure
Yeah.
enough, they compromised them.
Yeah, yeah, and it's horrible, and like as a small business, you're also more at risk because when that happens, you might have only 4 or 5 clients,
Right.
and now you've suddenly ruined the relationship with one of them, you know.
Well, and then as then that could affect their brand reputation across the rest because they could have relationships with the other clients, and like, if you got compromised,
Yeah,
I'm not going to take the risk and work with that company anymore. And
yeah,
that,
yeah,
with smaller companies, they're more likely to close from a breach, right?
yeah,
Than the larger ones because they can sustain the remediation, the brand
yeah.
reputation, and they can grow back. Where smaller companies might not be able to sustain it.
They can't. They don't have the overhead capacity to absorb that.
Oh, exactly. So we're coming close to the end. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to share?
I do. No, I think we did. I think we did pretty. We went through. I mean, I'm thinking back to what I wanted to talk about. No, that's pretty good.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about, Octiga, right? Is that
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know. I like to let people pronounce it how they want. Octiga, Octiga. You know, that just interests me how you could pronounce that. So the idea of Octiga was this sort of this octopus, you know,
Yeah.
fixing all these different settings and bells and whistles. And look, we were formed out of the idea, and it alludes to a lot of stuff we've just talking about here, that SMEs are underserved by cybersecurity. And I'm a SaaS guy from the background. You know, I've been learning cybersecurity in the last couple of years, and I was approached by another cybersecurity guy, and he said, "Look, let's put our brains together and let's automate the stuff that I do in the consultancy a lot, and let's do that. You know, on the end, that's really good for SMEs because they're being underserved by this stuff. Let's give them affordable detection. And the real problem for SMEs is, well, sort of the half that use Office 365, they don't know how to configure it correctly. Not trying to be disingenuous to them, but there's a lot of bells and whistles. The cloud is not secure out of the box kind of idea. So, you know, part of the what we wanted to focus on is a load of wizards that really simplify that a small medium enterprise can get their teeth into, and then it's sort of a cheap, affordable, I won't say cheap, but an affordable monitoring solution to, you know, keep them secure, all at a kind of affordable price. So that was our raison d'etre, and that's what's brought us the platform that we released recently. It's also got remediation. Again, I would talk about the NIST thing, right? It's that whole cybersecurity journey. It's not just focusing on, you know, I'm dealing with external attacks. You know, that covers, you know, when you do that, you naturally cover all the internal and the external, and that's sort of our journey. So far, does that answer your question on Octiga?
No, it's
Is there
perfect.
anything you'd
Yeah.
like to know?
Well, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they have any questions?
Go to Octiga.io. There's a contact page there. You can drop it there. I'm Rob McFeely, I think my handle is on LinkedIn. You can get me up there. I love LinkedIn. It's not as saturated as email, right? For me anyway.
Right.
And you can reach me on LinkedIn. You know, drop to our site, Octiga.io, Octiga.io, and drop into the contact page. And we're always on. Our info email address doesn't go into the bin. We try to answer all those, and reach up, ask me a question. You know, I love having a chat.
For sure. And then what I'll do, guys, you guys are watching, I'll post in the description when this gets reposted on YouTube and all the shared sites.
Sure.
I'll actually keep it the website as well as the social sites that you guys could go and reach out and ask any questions that you might have. Robert, this was awesome. It was great to kind of talk to you in the new year and to kind of see kind of the plans. What's your plan for 2021?
Well, we've just released, and we've got some POCs running, and we're trying to get adopters in. One of the things we're doing right now is we're letting people into the platform for free for some time. All we're looking for in exchange for that is feedback. You know, look, our platform is ready to go, but we're not. You know, we're not trying to be aggressive about making people pay up front, because we realize that the capital we need right now is feedback to make it better, so that we can pull that back into our hockey stick. And so that's our sort of our growth strategy. So look, we're looking for people to just try it out as much as possible, and give us that feedback. So that's the exciting things that happen with us right now. And we're also reaching out to partners, consultants, managed service providers who want to get on board, who want to try that and want to find a kind of an affordable solution for SMEs, SMBs, as you guys call them in North America, small medium businesses, small to medium enterprises.
Awesome. Now, if anyone's watching this right now, if you guys have any questions before we, finish off the stream, let me know if you're on Twitch or YouTube. Comment. We'll answer any questions right now. I think for me, Robert, I mean, looking at this and kind of looking at the recap of 2020 and then where we're going, I think you're right. I think it comes down to culture. I think it comes down to cybersecurity awareness, and now really looking at how companies like ours, right, we're going to really support people over the next 12 months, because I don't think this pandemic worldwide is going to subside anytime soon, because there's still a lot going on. I mean, people are the vaccines and things that they're doing. I think companies are still going to, have the challenges, and they're going to need support. They're going to need not only just education, they're going to need resources. They're going to need experts to kind of give them guidance and advice.
Yeah, and that's got to be easy and accessible for them, because they've got their own worries right now, whether that's business worries or whether that's home worries. And let's face it, we're all facing both.
Right.
And that's got to be easy and accessible. And so that's our job, right?
For sure. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna have you wait in the lobby. I'm just gonna finish off this. So, guys, this has been a great podcast. I mean, we've learned a lot going on in 2020, a lot happening in this new year. Robert really gave us some insight about, cloud security and, what Octiga is going to be doing and working on. Again, I'm going to have in the comments below in the description. If you want to connect and reach out, he's going to have the social sites, everything out there. I'll be posting this on Thursday to let you know. And we're just going to keep going and just keep rocking. Now, to let you guys know, tonight there's going to be another live session. I'm going to be doing a meetup. I'm going to be talking about some cybersecurity defense in depth. So a lot of great things happening there. Again, I'll have the links to that. Watch my social sites, Brandon at twitter.com, or sorry, Brandon, twitter.com at / Brandon Krieger. Watch that. You're going to see the post out there when that goes live. Again, the goal for me for 2021 is just to help you guys as much as possible, bringing experts like Robert in so that we can help you learn more about cybersecurity and just really protect yourself as you're going. And so last, I want to remind you, don't forget, software's hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.